YouTube just announced last week that they have reached 1 billion monthly active viewers of podcast content. And that's billion with a B, which is why I'm making this video, because YouTube is changing the game of podcasting forever. And I want to break down why and what that means for everyday podcasters like me and you. My name is Misbah Haque, by the way. If this is our first time crossing paths, in 2016, I started my first podcast out of my childhood bedroom. And within a year, that show helped me land my dream job, coaching Fortune 1000 executives and professional athletes. I've also launched shows that have gone on to do over 1 million downloads and have become successful client acquisition channels. So anyway, let's dive into why this is such a big deal. Last year, in 2024, around the same time, in February, there was a letter from the CEO of YouTube that included the 4 big bets that YouTube was taking that year. And there are 2 big bets in particular that I think are worth paying attention to. The first one was recognizing creators as next generation studios. This is pretty crazy because what they're essentially saying is, look, you guys are more valuable than just the Jimmy Fallons and the Tonight Shows that are coming over to YouTube. Because remember, there was a period in the YouTube world where there was a ton of everyday creators like me and you making normal videos. And then all of a sudden, when everybody figured out that YouTube was the place to be, was the place to go, there's a lot of money there, every single major network, major personality has now worked their way into also having YouTube, right? And so then there was this several year period where only the highest production value stuff would actually show up, right? Things from The Tonight Show, things from Netflix's YouTube channel, right? Some of these big corporations that were already owning the media landscape. And it was starting to take over what YouTube started out as, right? Everyday people being able to share videos with each other. And that social media vibe that it had was starting to go away. It felt like it was only available to the people that had the nicest equipment and the biggest budgets. So them admitting that, hey, we really are focusing on you guys and we're helping you become the next generation studios. We already see how that's been happening, but we want to double down on that. That was a big deal. The next big bet that they made, which stood out to me, was expanding into living rooms and subscriptions, right? And so the fact that they are focusing on diving into that, those 2 points combined make it so that they are really in it to help protect the creators, right? They want to be the space where people continue to go. And I do think that YouTube has been the most reliable out of any social media platform that we can think of. So now let's come back to when you were starting an audio podcast, right? You were on Apple, you were on Spotify, but one of the major downsides of starting a podcast was that discovery was terrible and still is to this day on a lot of those apps, right? It's very difficult to be served new things and find exactly what you're looking for. You're not really getting a ton of new discovery and new listeners unless you hit some top charts list, or maybe your guest that you had on shares the episode with their audience. And so discovery was very limited in places like Spotify, Apple, and the traditional spots. So YouTube was the place that every podcaster would go to take advantage of the discovery, right? And one of the things that you would commonly hear from people who are natively on YouTube, they would say, it's too long, it doesn't work, retention styled editing was not going to be possible there, it loses attention, nobody watches videos that are longer than 10 minutes, right? This was the narrative for a very long time. And I think that narrative actually prevented a lot of podcasters who would have done video earlier, right? But they just didn't because that's the narrative. Oh, podcasts don't do well on YouTube. They're too long. It can't compete with the Mr. Beast styled stuff. So despite that being the narrative, there were still people who would publish their podcasts on YouTube, right? And including me, with my clients and myself, when I would be publishing my stuff to YouTube, I knew, and I would give a heads up, look, you are not going to get the amount of views on this full podcast episode as you might get if you filmed this very specifically for the YouTube algorithm, right? But then what started happening is more and more live streamers started coming onto the platform as well, right? So people who were on Twitch or on Discord or on all these other places where streaming happens, they doubled down by coming over to YouTube as well, right? In many cases, you can have multiple cameras going and you can be streaming to YouTube and to Twitch and stuff at the same time. So it was a way of making more revenue as a streamer, right? You're in another place that's the same landscape, long form asset is being repurposed. So why not do it? The next thing I find very interesting is the fact that YouTube did not acknowledge the entire time that this is going on, where streamers are publishing, there's long form podcasts on there, right? They didn't really acknowledge until that letter in February of 2024 from the CEO revealing the 4 big bets. They did not reveal until then that long form was something that they were really attached to and wanted to continue investing in. Because remember, the rage was all Instagram Reels versus TikTok versus YouTube Shorts. Everybody was trying to compete in the space of short form video. And if you remember when Shorts first came out on the platform, it was not that great, right? They started to fix some of the short stuff where it's okay. Now this stuff is clearly it's getting served to more aligned people. I've had several clients I've gotten from shorts where they're like, oh yeah, the shorts brought me in. I saw you had longer form stuff. And then I went down the rabbit hole. So it has definitely improved. And if they wanted to, they have the resources to be able to continue dominating the shorts game, but they're not, right? They have recognized that, look, podcasters are coming to us. They have nowhere else to go. Everybody's supporting these short clips. There's no long form landscape aside from Spotify, which is offering now video as well. But aside from that, YouTube is the main go-to platform. For live streaming, same thing there as well. And then what have they begun to notice that everyone else has also noticed about live streaming and podcasting? It's that even though those are maybe visually boring to watch, right? It's just somebody talking or reacting to stuff. The concentrated amounts of people that listen to that episode anyway, or that watch that live stream anyway, is exactly what yields the trust that everybody is after in podcasting, right? We got to see in the US election how podcasting was used and what a significant impact it had. And it was used, why? Because the attention is there, but not just that, but because the trust is there, right? People trust these individuals who are willing to sit there and talk for 30 minutes, an hour, without these crazy effects happening every 2 seconds on your screen, the way that it is on YouTube. Even better than maybe a traditional YouTube video channel where it's like people will watch like 30% of the video versus, hey, if somebody watches 60%, 70% of this episode, that's a really big deal, right? So those were the first couple signs. The next big sign that happened was when Google Podcasts announced that they were going away. Okay, so Google Podcasts were a platform that I would publish on, and my clients would as well, because hey, it's attached to Google. And when you would search stuff up on Google, if you had a Google Podcast, they would push your stuff up to the top and you would get to see, hey, wow, this is also here as well. Now, when they killed Google Podcasts, I knew, I had an intuitive feeling. I'm like, okay, this has to be because YouTube already exists. They know people are going to YouTube already. Why would we also invest in a separate app called Google Podcasts, right? That is just separate from the brand and is maybe splitting some attention, right? Now, keep in mind in the YouTube Music app, it's playing video as well. So if you're watching, let's say, a music video, you could listen to it. But what's cool is I think you can watch it too because it's connected to this giant, the biggest video library in the world, right? Which, by the way, that's another reason for discovery that YouTube was just so epic and couldn't be beat, is because if you're the second largest search engine in the world after Google, guess what? When people are Googling your name, Googling your podcast, and videos are getting recommended more and showing up at the top of search results, it pays to be on YouTube. So now let's fast forward to this big announcement of 2025, which is YouTube releasing the news that, hey, we have 1 billion monthly active viewers of podcast content. The reason that this is so insane, okay, is because all of the statistics and all of the numbers that have been tracked in the podcasting world have not really included too many YouTube channels and podcasts, right? It mostly has been taking a look at Spotify, Apple, and all of the audio platforms that are out there. And this number, we knew that people are consuming podcasts on YouTube, right? For me, I have been consuming on YouTube for years. It has been my favorite app over Spotify, over Apple. Like, even if I don't watch it, I'm literally just, it's face down or whatever, and I'm still consuming it there. It's just a convenience and preference thing, right? So the numbers are huge. It's unbelievable, right? 1 billion people, and that's not even a year, because that would be something, that'd still be a big deal. It's okay, 1 billion people a year are consuming this. But 1 billion people every single month shows the desire, the demand for real conversation, right? It's not just podcasts. It's what's behind the podcast. It's connection, it's conversation, right? Stuff that you are not getting maybe on the TikToks and the Instagrams, right? So what does this mean for people who are creating like me and you? And this coincides at a perfect time, and it's no accident, by the way. I know it seems like it is, but I'm convinced that it's not. You've probably heard of YouTube being on easy mode, and some other people have called it grandpa mode, right? Signifying that the idea of basically showing up, talking to the camera, maybe even recording into your laptop in a normal webcam, instead of this high-end production that we have all become accustomed to. And those have been the only people that have gotten the biggest rewards on YouTube, right? The people who had the highest production value continued to get all of the market share. But what is beginning to show is that people who are doing YouTube on easy mode, grandpa mode, whatever you want to call it, what they are really doing is podcasting, okay? Just because you're not talking to another guest, like that's not the only characteristic that defines what a podcast is. I encourage you to look at podcasting as a genre, okay? Not just a platform. Really what's going on with YouTube being on easy mode is there's a resurgence of people wanting normal conversation, okay? You don't need to impress me crazily with your hook. You don't need to confuse my brain with images every 2 to 3 seconds to just keep me hooked. You just need to show up with something to say and something you actually care about. And more people than ever before are actually willing to give you the time of day and listen, if that's true. Don't get me wrong, people still need retention styled editing and editing tricks to basically keep you hooked. But you'll probably notice, look at some of your favorite podcasts that you consume. There's been several that I'm not going to name their names, but there's been several where some of them, as they got bigger, they started doing more retention styled editing, right? They started making it more higher production value and more edits, cutting out filler words, all this stuff, right? What you'll begin to see is in the comments of those podcasts, there will be longtime fans and listeners who are literally saying, hey, like, we don't have TikTok brain. You don't need to be doing this. Like, I liked it better when you didn't have all this crazy B-roll and stuff like that. So you have people explicitly calling that out, saying, hey, I just want this to be uncut. Keep the filler words in there. It makes it feel more like a real conversation, like I'm listening. And that is a kind of consumer behavior that we had not really seen in the past. And that's because the consumers didn't know that's really what was happening. You just would view the finished product and you go, wow, why did 10 minutes just go by and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen? Duh, it's because of the retention styled editing. As it's become more common over the years, people understand after a minute or two, that's what you're doing, right? You're trying to hold my attention. And so if you don't deliver with something that actually of substance that holds attention, right? Like, it doesn't really work anymore. People know that's what's going on. So this whole easy mode on YouTube is a reflection of just being able to talk to the camera, being able to do a solo podcast, being able to publish a video that is uncut, unedited, and this unspoken contract between the viewer and me that, hey, you're not going to judge this for its production quality. This is a podcast. I'm telling you what's on my mind. I'm being vulnerable. I am here talking to you. I'm present. I'm not focused on me as much and trying to look as perfect as I can because it's a YouTube video or because it's an Instagram clip. So the combination of YouTube being on easy mode and then, of course, podcasting being bigger and bigger than ever before, and people really continuing to not just look at it as a platform, but a genre. And the way I can tell you I know this is because I've had famous brands that are like, have a big app, right? They paid me to do a commercial for them, right? Where it's like, me and we had another actor where we were essentially pretending like we're on a podcast. And so the key thing there is we were pretending that we were on a podcast. It wasn't a real podcast, but we were advertising the app through this fake setup. There's another billion-dollar brand I got to work with where they would do fake podcast episodes as well. They would do a longer episode. But the whole idea behind doing that fake podcast was for them to get like 20 or 30 clips that they could use against paid ads and that they could use for some of their organic stuff. The reason I mention that is, again, to encourage you to look at podcasting as a genre, not just a platform. Because if you do this, then what you can do is take the concepts of what makes podcasting so amazing and really take what applies to your show and leverage the hell out of that on YouTube. I think that this announcement, what it has done is proven to the people who are podcasters that, hey, there is a demand for this thing. We're not crazy, okay? There are people who are listening to this. This is no longer just an underground medium. People listen to podcasts. People watch podcasts, right? So that part is established. Now, the next thing that this is encouraging podcasters to do is to be more themselves, okay? So it's for a second allowing you to go, hey, if you didn't worry so much about exactly how you appear and how perfect your show seems, would you now even consider the idea of going on YouTube? Because many people are like, oh, it's a beast. I don't know if I want to get into it. And it is. It's a whole different addition to your podcast, going from audio only to video. But doing video was always worth it, but it was worth it because you could get clips. It wasn't just worth it for the long form episode. People mainly did it for the clips. But what's changing now is this desire for long form content, right? That makes it so that, look, even if it is not the full episode that people are consuming, they will want the short form clips. And by short form, I'm not just talking like shorts that are like under 3 minutes. I'm talking like a 10-minute clip, a 15-minute clip, a 20-minute clip. Being able to take a segment from that longer episode and turn it into a clip that is titled better as well, because the full episode that you upload to YouTube will never get as many views as something that is a 10-minute clip from that same episode and titled way, way better, because the titling is what's allowing you to package that video and frame it up, right? Because mostly for the longer form full episodes, you might be titling it in a way that is, it's not hitting all the topics that are actually included in there. You're covering maybe the overarching theme of what's there. You're showcasing who the guest might be, but you're not able to maybe accurately get a perfect title that covers the entire hour of content in the 50 characters. So this is where the opportunity to increase your uploads by basically repurposing clips, and again, for a streamer client that I have, repurposing streams, because it's the same concept, right? It's the genre, it's the style of me talking into a mic and connecting with the viewer on the other end, right? And occasionally, hey, if I want to have a guest on, that is also a style that I can leverage. But I want to encourage more and more people to look into podcasting as something that can be a solo format. It is not just an interview style, okay? It is harder to grow if you are a solo podcast. It is harder to get views on it and downloads on it than if you just had a guest, right? But long term, the thing that begins to happen if you observe any solo podcast, the dedication that they have from their fan base, even though it takes longer to build, right? Theo Von from this past weekend is a perfect example. His solo episodes are him being so him and so normal and vulnerable and not just trying to look cool and sound cool because he's in front of another big comedian or another guest. That contrast is something that the audience will likely love, right? So how you are when you are with a guest is not the exact same as how you will be when you are talking just directly to them. And previously, unless a podcaster was okay and comfortable with themselves enough to do a solo version of it, you wouldn't get that. You would only maybe get that on a YouTube channel where they felt like they could do that a little more, right? And so what this is doing is it's bridging the gap between making podcasting seem like it's just this separate otherworldly type of content, and allowing it to exist in the culture, allowing it to be something that is, hey, everybody consumes this, right? How can we lean in to this format of us just talking, right? Instead of a 5-minute segment or a 60-second segment, what would it look like for our brand, our business, me, to actually talk for 30 minutes, to talk for an hour? And I think we're just afraid to do that because we're afraid of looking stupid. We're afraid of not getting the views, not getting the downloads, and being judged, right? All of these things that have been existent ever since content creation ever began. But this is essentially YouTube saying, hey, if you are somebody who has something to say, but you don't quite have the highest production value, you don't have the best editor on staff, right? You don't have maybe even the best thumbnails, we are willing to give you a shot. We are willing to put your videos and your podcasts in front of more people. It is not just about the folks that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. It is not just about the people who have the best thumbnails, right? You're seeing this trend, and it's been about 1.5 years now since I've been seeing this happen more and more, right? When easy mode on YouTube first began and started, and the first couple people started mentioning it and saying that it was a thing, it's been about 1.5 years to 2 years now since that has been going on. What this means for you is if you have at all considered using YouTube as a discovery engine for your podcast, it opens up room for you to go, how do I want to play this? And the thing that's comforting is that nobody is sitting there watching the podcast like with their eyeballs for a full hour to 2 hours every single time they watch one. That is just not how people consume, right? You might watch 5 minutes this time and then, oh, boom, I got to go do something. I'll tune into it later tonight, right? Or tomorrow. Okay, then you'll consume another 15 minutes, right? Sometimes you'll watch maybe 5 minutes of it, but then go, okay, cool, I got to do some other stuff. Let me put it face down and continue doing my stuff, right? The way that people consume podcasts, even though it is video and even though it is on YouTube, many times is still not eyes glued to the screen watching it. Because remember, part of the benefit of podcasts is that you can consume it while you are doing something else, right? So people who value their time and like to do important things are big fans of podcasts because they can consume in the background. Even if it is just simply to be on there, to be existent on YouTube, to take advantage of the search purposes, to take advantage of new people. Because I can tell you, I have with Habit Chess, the show that I can tell you with my podcast, Habit Chess, the growth that I have had in the 7 months that I've been taking it a little more seriously. The new subscribers, the new viewers, the new email subscribers I've even gotten from YouTube is unparalleled. It's unmatched because I have trackers, by the way, for some of the videos that I put on Habit Chess, like the audio versions of the description and then the video versions of the description. And so when you compare sometimes, oh, cool, the audio version got 16 downloads, right? But hey, that same video version on YouTube got me 15 views. And it got me 35 plus subscribers, right? Being able to break past my first 100 subscribers, which I think personally is one of the hardest things that you can do. It's not even getting to 1 million, getting to 100,000. The hardest part is the first 100 or the first 1,000, because that's when it feels like you've got nothing behind you, right? You can't even say, oh yeah, I've got 1,000 people. You feel like there's nobody, and you still have to create despite knowing that there's nobody. So mentally, a lot of times, the first 100 or the first 1,000 is the hardest part. And I can tell you the speed at which I was able to cross the 100 subscribers, if I had just continued to do it audio only, it would not have been possible. It would have taken twice the amount of time. And that is honestly just the nature of audio podcasts at the moment. Discovery is terrible. Spotify is doing a better job of trying to fix it, and some other people are trying to do it. But honestly, people have not paid as much attention and invested as many resources into fixing the discovery problem before. And maybe part of that is because they would be competing with YouTube, right? YouTube is the best discovery platform. It is the best search engine to some extent. And so it is a place where I think there are going to be tons of new creators flocking to YouTube and publishing their podcasts here now because these announcements have given people confidence, right? It's given people permission to be like, oh, okay, this is for us too. We don't just look stupid to the rest of YouTube if we're doing a podcast or if we're live streaming, right? Which, by the way, I want to point out that podcasts being harder to find is actually one of the things in its history that has made the trust aspect between the host and the listener so huge, because you don't have on audio platforms the casual listeners that are going to listen to this and write a bad comment and move on, right? The way that you do on other social platforms, that just does not exist because it takes so much work to find the episode in the first place, and it takes work to actually listen to the content and figure out what's going on. And then it takes more work to actually find a place to comment or leave a review. And so while discovery has been completely enhanced by YouTube being able to do this, it does open you up more now to some of the criticism, right? People who are just not going to like maybe your show. Those folks may not have been present on Spotify or Apple, but hey, they're on YouTube, right? Because there's billions of people on YouTube. So there is that to keep in mind, but I want you to know that is a natural repellent that you should be excited for. So the repellent of somebody getting bored by long form content, right? Not having the attention span to sit there for longer than 30 seconds. That's actually totally fine. That's not the person that you want to be a subscriber for your long form podcast, right? So this is a natural filter, right? That serves as a repellent because the people who want to listen will actually listen. And once they've listened, they're more likely to keep listening versus the people who are like, oh, this is too long. Oh, this person's ranting and rambling. Let people say that. Let people continue to scroll on and find other options. Because I'm telling you, from my experience with YouTube, both as a small channel on Pod Mahal, small channel on Habit Chest, but also getting to work with channels that have over 450,000 subscribers. So the thing that I think that's going to benefit everyday podcasters like me and you is one, the permission, right? The permission we all have to be like, okay, cool. The platform allows this. They publicly have said that they're welcoming this kind of content. They're actually rewarding it by allowing you to get matched up to people who would actually enjoy it. It was not publicly acknowledged before. It may have been hinted at, but it was not so explicitly said that, hey, we're here for you. We support you. You guys belong here on the platform too. The other thing this does, which is absolutely amazing for people like me and you, is that it creates healthy competition for the behemoths. So the people that are the YouTubes and the Googles and the Spotifys and the Apples and the iHeartRadios and all these different podcast apps and platforms that are out there, it pushes them to continue to solve this discovery problem, continue to solve the search problem instead of just relying on YouTube. Time will tell if people don't want to compete and they just want to let YouTube take all of the market share here. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Spotify is having their own version, their own angle of how, hey, we're going to help you get better recommendations. You have access to a paying subscriber base that is as large as Netflix's, right? That's also a big deal because, hey, somebody who's paid some money to be on this platform yields maybe a different kind of listener than somebody who's casually browsing and trolling for free, right? So there are all these little nuances of how it's going to force some of these other players to compete. Apple, for example, has not made a ton of new innovation to their podcasts. Yes, in the past couple months or last year, they did allow podcasts to be searchable in the web browser. So you didn't need to go into the podcast app on Apple devices. But guess what? They did that in response to Spotify making that very accessible as well. So they're very reactionary, and YouTube is a big enough player to get other people to react, right? If they do, that's great news for me and you. That's just like what we're experiencing with all these shorts, right? Whether you're on Reels or TikTok or YouTube Shorts or LinkedIn, they're all competing for us to give them our shorts, right? Because they know that's going on and they want to own that. And the competition between all of them is good for the consumer because, hey, we get slightly more reach. Some of these places are going to be incentivized to give you more reach because the other apps don't, right? And that definitely gets loyalty, right? If you find that, hey, YouTube has given me 1,000 views an episode versus the podcast apps are giving me 10 downloads an episode, of course that's going to get people to go to YouTube. And so time will tell how that works out. But I think the long-term effect of this is a positive for the creator because you over time develop multiple assets, right? So for the same effort of recording this podcast episode, you get to be on Apple and Spotify, right? But now you get to also be on YouTube, which is its own platform. You get its own set of subscribers, right? The people who consume on YouTube may not be on your Apple or Spotify, and vice versa. I've noticed the same thing with email lists, right? So naturally, you should have an email list for your podcast or your YouTube channel. So if that is an asset that you already have, and the people from your pod, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or whatever, clicking through the description, landing onto your email list, yes, it's coming from the same work that you did, right? But at the same time, at the end of the day, when you are, let's say, pitching this to an advertiser or sponsor, or you're using it to market your own products and services, instead of just one place where on your audio platforms you can make an announcement, hey, I've got this new thing out, right? You've now got 3 separate assets that have been created, right? You've got the YouTube following, you've got the Spotify and Apple following, and then you've got the email list that's grown, and it's come from primarily the other stuff, right? So this move is primarily a game changer for the smaller creators and newer podcasters who just haven't gotten in the game because you think you need $100,000 to build out this crazy studio and have 10 cameras. And it just doesn't seem or feel like something that is in your horizon, right? So you don't even think about it. Versus now, because of the incentives, because of the way that the platform is now operating, and because of some of the most recent news, hopefully this allows your mind to expand a little bit on it. Maybe it is possible. Maybe I can be on video. Maybe I can make my podcast. Maybe this is the year that I can go from an audio only show to a video podcast. Or maybe the video podcast that I have in mind is now just more accessible to do. It's more sustainable to do. Because remember, in the last decade or 2 decades of podcasting, how many shows have continued to just fail because they thought that they needed the highest production quality stuff in order for their episode to be worth it, in order for their episode to be competitive. When what we're seeing is just this next era of the internet, there's going to be a lot of flash. There's going to be a lot of AI content. There's going to be a lot of perfectly edited videos, perfectly edited thumbnails. But to me, it's similar to how when I read an email or when I read a blog post, and when I see a word that is messed up or a letter that's capitalized by accident or a period that's missing, I'm low-key happy. I'm like, okay, this person actually wrote it, right? This is not AI. Versus when everything is just so perfect, we're going to get a little bit desensitized. My assumption is we're going to get a little bit desensitized to the things that are too perfect. The stuff that seems pixel perfect will have its audience, of course, right? But it is going to create a segment of an audience all around the world that wants the real stuff. Okay, they want the uncut, unedited, unfiltered, talk to me, make me feel like I'm in the room with you. And so if you are the kind of creator that gets excited about making that kind of content like I do, then this era, this time, this change is for you. So I hope this was useful. I hope it was exciting. Drop a comment. I would love to hear what you think about this, what your thoughts are on this, and make sure to check out some of the links and all that good stuff in the description below. I have tons of free and paid tools that are meant to help you start or grow your podcast with YouTube. But I appreciate you hanging out, taking the time and listening to me today. Best of luck to you on your journey, and I will see you on the next one.